Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid. Now we're nearing the end of my M54 engine rebuild series, and if you've been following along this whole time, I really want to thank you. If you have donated to the project, I really want to thank you, because that's not even something I asked you to do, but some of you guys donated and I so appreciate it. I do want to let you know that YouTube has decided to end their fan funding program. So as a result, I've started a Patreon account. So if you are interested in that, if you want to throw me something, totally appreciate it. So there's a link in the description of this video, as well as on the front of my channel, as always. So I want to talk about the costs associated with doing this rebuild, because that is by far one of the most popular questions I have been asked all along. And there's been a link in the description of every video. There's been a Dropbox link containing documents for like specs and costs and parts and everything. All this time. So I probably don't mention it enough, or I don't even know if I have mentioned it, but now you know there's a Dropbox link containing some spreadsheets and whatnot. So there's this spreadsheet that I've put together of all my costs so far. So I'm just going to go over them for you guys. Now we'll start with parts. The biggest part that I bought was a master rebuild kit. Now this kit contained new pistons. I chose oversized pistons, but you don't have to choose that. When you order a kit like this, you can choose if you want oversized pistons, you can choose if you want undersized bearings for the engine crankshaft, both the main bearings and the rod bearings. You can pick whichever size you want. It all depends on the state of your crankshaft after you get it back from the machine shop. You know, if the machine shop determines, or if you determine that you've got out of round wear or whatnot, and so you need to get it ground to an undersize, you just tell the machine shop will, you know, grind to the nearest undersize they can. They'll tell you what that is. You then tell the seller you buy this kit from, and they will send you the proper bearings. And that kit also contained like all the gaskets, contained a new head gasket, contained new intake gaskets, and so on and so forth. I do want to mention, first of all, I want to mention that there's only one kit available on eBay. I don't know where else you can buy another one of these kits, but eBay is my kind of preferred source for buying things like this. I had some complaints about this kit. Namely, a lot of the small gaskets were wrong. For instance, it did come with a new valve cover gasket. You know, it came with a big valve cover gasket, but the grommets were the wrong size, which kind of made the whole valve cover gasket part of it useless, because now I need to buy another valve cover gasket. And there were some other problems with it too. There was the fact that I needed to use a thicker head gasket, because they needed to machine off a little bit too much from my head and my block. That might not be the case for you, and I would totally recommend waiting until you've had your machine work done before you go ahead and buy a kit like this. Some machine shops they'll ask for the piston to be provided to them during the rebuild process so that they can size the pistons to the bores, but it really doesn't matter in my opinion, because they still ended up machining it to 84.5 millimeters. So if you just tell them make it 84.5 millimeters, they'll do that and it'll be fine. And then you can just, I definitely would recommend waiting until the very last moment before you buy a kit like this, because you never know what sizes you're gonna need, if you're gonna need a thicker head gasket, so on and so forth. So in my particular case, I should have waited. Well, waiting actually wouldn't have done much. I mean, I knew that I didn't have to get my crank ground for undersized bearings. So in my particular case, it worked out, so I already knew ahead of time. But if you don't measure your crank, if you're relying on the machine shop to determine things for you, wait until you get the parts back and wait for them to tell you what you need. So I also needed to spend about $103 on used connecting rods, because my connecting rods were slightly bent, which is what caused the tapered wear on my bearings, in case you have not seen that previous video. So that was about $103 at the junkyard. I also decided to get M52 TU style oil control rings, and I found a seller on eBay who was willing to sell me just the oil rings. Normally, piston rings are sold in a full set. So you got the top ring, the middle ring, and the oil control ring. They're sold piston, they're sold in single piston amounts. So you have to buy 6 of them. You have to buy a quantity of 6 if you want to get them for the whole engine. But I was able to find a seller who would just sell me the oil rings, and he sold me oversized oil rings as well. The older style 3-piece oil rings from the M52 TU that do not wear down like the M54 oil rings do and cause oil consumption. So I was able to get that. I will put a link in the description to that seller and that item if you are interested. And if you go ahead and contact him, if you don't need oversized rings, you can go ahead and contact him. He'll sell you the standard size rings as well. Those were $70. Which is not too bad. I also, you need to get new connecting rod bolts. So those were $35. They don't come in the rebuild kit. You need to get new coolant pipes. Those 2 black plastic coolant pipes, when you try to pull them out of the head and the block, they're just gonna crumble on you. So you're gonna need new ones of those. That was $52. Timing chain guides, they're brittle after 100 or after 150,000 miles or however many miles you have on your car. At this point, no matter what, at this age, they're going to be brittle. They're going to break when you take them off, so you're going to need new ones of those. Those were $32. The thicker head gasket, it was a Victor Reinz head gasket. Got it off eBay. It was $56. I damaged the crank bearing, the main bearings that came in the rebuild kit. So I had to replace those. That was $93. I also bought 2 oil pump nuts that came with like a hole for safety wire. That's a thing, the oil pump nut tends to come loose, particularly on the M54 3.0 size engine. But you know what? This only happens if you're racing the car. If you're spending a lot of time at redline, apparently some kind of a sympathetic vibration occurs in the crankshaft when it's over 6,000 RPM, and that could tend to back the oil pump nut off. So they sell an oil pump nut that has a little hole EMD'd through it that you can slip some safety wire around, and then you can just wire that safety wire up to the oil pump sprocket. That I made a mistake during the installation of that. I used a clicker style torque wrench to torque it on, and because it's a reverse threaded and then clicker style torque wrenches don't work in the reverse direction, which I didn't know, I ended up stripping out not 1 but 2 of those oil pump nuts before I figured that out. So that was $27 wasted, but still a good thing to buy, and now you know what not to do. The rear main seal that came in that kit was the wrong rear main seal, and I went and knocked my new rear main seal, or my old rear main seal, out of the rear main seal housing. I had replaced that rear main seal when I did my transmission rebuild about a year ago, so it was still fine. It could have been reused. I just decided to use the brand new one that came with the kit just because. And that was a mistake, because that rear main seal that it came with was wrong, and I had to buy another one for 20 bucks at my local parts house. But it's going to cost you $50 on eBay, so beware of that. There were problems with that kit, but overall it should be fine. So total for all those parts was $988. Yeah, I had some unexpected expenditures there. Particularly the connecting rods and the extra bearings. That was like another $200 right there. So that really added up. And that's what happens during these rebuilds. Things add up real quick. Tools, I spent about $500 on tools. Mostly it was the Vanos timing tools, which are absolutely mandatory. I was able to get those for 120 bucks. That seller on eBay, I think, is still sold out, so you're probably gonna spend around 150 bucks for those tools. 50 bucks on an engine stand from Harbor Freight. The valve keeper remover that I bought was $56, but you don't need that. I wouldn't buy that if I were you. Just use the valve tool that I actually came up with in my video on replacing valve stem seals. So just take a look at that. I made that tool myself, and that is what I would use. I wouldn't spend any money for a little valve keeper tool that you just hit with a hammer to remove the valve keepers, because that's just a waste of money, basically. I also spent $100 on a digital torque angle wrench from Eastwood. I am not happy with that tool. I'm gonna do a separate review on it, but I would not spend the money on that tool, quite honestly. Or, you know, maybe you should, maybe I would, because to use the manual style torque angle gauge where you have to like hook the little bar up and make sure it stops against something is actually really annoying to use. You could just, you know, you could just visually eyeball it when you want to do that 90-degree turn. You could do that. I wouldn't do that. That's not exactly accurate, but plenty of people have gotten away with just doing that. So a dial bore gauge, I decided to buy also an outside micrometer kit. The dial bore gauge was $60 and the outside micrometers were about $100. You don't have to buy those if you don't want to. You can let the machine shop do everything for you. They'll measure it up and they'll determine what needs to happen. So they'll determine if you need to put in oversized pistons, they'll determine if you need to regrind your crank. But here's the thing, depending on the machine shop you go to, if you kind of get an unscrupulous one, they could tell you that you need to have your block machined or whatever, or you need to have your crankshaft machined just to charge you some extra money, just because they prefer to do that and, you know, make everything fresh and brand new. But if you go ahead and measure it yourself, you can determine whether or not you need this or that service done, and you could potentially get your machine work done for cheaper. So I highly recommend measuring this stuff yourself, although you do have to consider the fact that another $160 actually might be, you know, make up for the amount of money that you're going to save by buying those tools. So you could just come out even in the end. So totally up to you. And then a piston ring compressor, 10 bucks, little piston ring pliers, really cheap. Most of the other basic engine tools that you use, if you end up getting a cylinder hone, those can be really cheap. The little 3-fingered hones can be really cheap. The dingleberry hone, the flex hone, that's around $30 if you decide to go that route. That's a little bit easier of a tool to use. So about $500 in tools or so, but that could be cut down depending on your choices. Let's see, what else? So the machine work. I ended up spending just almost exactly $1,000 at the machine shop. And I did not go to the world's cheapest machine shop. I didn't go to the typical on the corner machine shop or in the part of town where, you know, in the part of town where the city dump is. There are always a lot of auto like junkyards and repair shops and machine shops down in those areas. I don't know why, but I guess that's the industrial area, right? I think if I went to one of those shops, I definitely could have come out of this a lot cheaper, but I wasn't confident that they were going to do the work to my satisfaction. So I went with just a little bit more expensive of a shop. Maybe I could have gotten most of this work done for 600 bucks, 700 bucks, maybe something around that, I think. The reason I'm saying this is because I'm currently working on a Kia Sportage, and I just had the cylinder head rebuilt for $200, which was just a resurface, a valve job, and hot tanking it, cleaning it up. And that was really cheap. And it's an aluminum head, and they actually did a pretty good job on it. Just to put that in perspective, what I spent on the BMW cylinder head was just about $550 on the cylinder head. But yeah, I also had to get a new cylinder head to replace my old cylinder head because it was no good. And I think I actually haven't included that on this list. So I'm gonna have to edit this list before I go ahead and post this video. But yeah, so that was an additional expense for me. I spent $125 at a junkyard to get a used head because my head was cracked and unusable. So little things like that, you know, it all adds up. Depending on which machine shop you go to, you can spend $1,000 like I did, or you can almost certainly come out of it a lot less. I could have probably, if I went to the machine shop that just did this, maybe I could have come out of there for 500 bucks. I'm thinking probably 500 bucks. But then again, this was a 4-cylinder head, and you know, the BMW is a 6-cylinder head, so they might charge a little bit more for that, or they definitely will charge a little bit more for that. All in all, I spent about 2,500 bucks, which is a lot, to be honest. And the only reason I decided to go for a full rebuild on this engine is basically because I got this channel, and you know, it was going to be a lot of great videos, and nobody actually had a video series like this, which just showed every step on rebuilding an engine and putting it back into service. There are a lot of videos on how to take, you know, a used engine you get out of a junkyard or something and build it up and do like a power build, you know, and usually it's a Chevy or a Ford or something like that. There are a lot of videos on that, but there really was no video series on YouTube for just rebuilding a stock engine to a stock configuration and putting it back in the car and going. So I really wanted to make that, and because of that, that's the reason I decided to do a top and bottom end rebuild. I think had it not been for the channel, I probably would have just rebuilt the top end, which is so much easier, a whole lot cheaper. You don't need any specialty tools. You don't need an engine hoist. Oh, that's something I didn't include on this list either, and I didn't include an engine hoist because I was able to borrow this one, but that is another expense you're going to have to consider. That's going to be another $170 from Harbor Freight, I think. Every little, you got to consider all that stuff. You do need tools. You do need, to rebuild a bottom end, you need extra tools. You need an engine hoist. You need an engine stand. It ends up, you know, making the bill go up, 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 and up. And the only real reason for rebuilding your bottom end, unless something is drastically wrong, the only reason for doing it is to solve the oil consumption problem. And you have to consider the fact that you can do the O2 Pilot mod for $3 and solve your oil consumption issue. So it really doesn't make financial sense to rebuild your bottom end in the way that I did unless there's some problem, unless you've got a knocking sound, unless you throw a rod bearing, unless whatever. It really doesn't make that much sense. And I will tell you guys now, the car is a little bit faster. I mean, it's a little bit quicker, but not that much, not significantly. I mean, I do kind of notice it, but then again, I don't really notice it, if you know what I mean, because I didn't really do anything that was going to add additional power. I just kind of refreshed it. So the engine feels a little bit fresher, but it's never gonna feel like significantly noticeably faster. I don't know if I would say noticeably, because it is kind of noticeably faster, but I don't know if it's $2,000 noticeably faster. So had it not been for the channel, I definitely would not have rebuilt the bottom end on my engine. And I probably, with rebuilding the top end, I probably would have went to the same machine shop, and I guess I would have spent around $750 on parts and so on and so forth, because I had to get that replacement head, $125. So, you know, I could have gotten out of this for only $750 instead of the $2,500 that I ended up spending on it. So I kind of only did that because of the channel, because I was making videos. So you definitely have to take all these things into consideration when deciding on what rebuild you want to do. I mean, think about this. I probably would see, I would feel the same difference in the car if I just rebuilt the head, because even though it still would have had blow by, I don't think that would have reduced compression at all. The original cause for my reduced compression was the head gasket failure, because the head warped and caused the head gasket failure, caused that leakage into adjacent cylinders. So by just fixing the head, or getting that used head and fixing it up and popping that on, I would have the same result I have now, and I would just need to be doing the O2 Pilot mod. So I could have spent $750 now that I know, now that I look back on it. So take that into consideration. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, if you learned something, consider subscribing. I am the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching.